It either takes significant ignorance or some serious balls to nerf a damaging ability to a painful degree and days after announce buffing literally every damaging thing Warrior has to offer, including the things which really don't need buff at the moment. But perhaps there is a method to this madness. Balance patches we get to preview, like the one coming in 2 weeks, are planned, while hotfixes are more of holy shit we set the kitchen on fire kind of deal. So when Spear dropped and immediately made Berserker viable, Balance Men swooped in to beat the thing back to the size before the regularly scheduled buff happens. That's a semi-logical explanation to ping-pong balancing of damage I could come up with. That said, I don't really understand how devs managed to internally justify buffing damage specifically of what's already the only way in hell to outdamage a Willbender. If you also want to outdamage a Willbender, firstly, build in the description, and secondly, check out Bullshit Brigade's Discord server for access to all the chromosomes required by task at hand. You can also support me financially through Patreon on my crusade to gain even more chromosomes. But without further delay, let's speculate. Having current Berserker's damage as a baseline and some semblance of an idea how will it look in 2 weeks, can we determine whether or not Berserker will become meta? We can. But will it become meta?
Nope.
None of current Berserker's problems are even related to lack of damage. As if aforementioned damage lands, Zeg can already dismantle entire fights in fractions of seconds. To be quite frank, it is hard to think about Berserker's damage output and even consider slapping even more damage on top of that pile, as most burst combos Zeg can perform already climb into 40k territory in terms of raw numbers. The main difficulty Berserker faces is not how well he can dish out Wpierdol, but how his signature mechanic, the Rage, makes him inferior to every other glass cannon in the game. No spec in the game, other than Berserker, is locked out of parts of their kit for full rigid duration of their signature mechanic. Be it Necromancers, Holosmith or Soulbeast. All can exit their mechanic at will, returning to normal if situation calls for it. Meanwhile, Berserker can be cocked out of a victory by his own class mechanic quite easily. Being in Rage means no access to core burst, and in some cases, be it Greatsword for Fury Generation, Spear for Evasion, Dagger for Mobility or bypassing blocks, Sword when fighting someone with Reflex, there are numerous scenarios where Core Burst is more beneficial than Primal Burst or avoids being countered by something the Primal Burst is countered by. And Berserker, in his supposedly empowered state, is simply locked out of all those for a period of time, and unless traded for it, he can't end Rage early to regain access to his core bursts. This is a problem no other spec has to contend with. Imagine if Necromancer or Spectre couldn't leave Shroud until they completely ran out of life force, or Holo couldn't leave Photon Forge until overheating, or if Soulbeast could only stay merged for 15 seconds and couldn't unmerge manually. That's Berserker for you. I'll be prone to argue that from all signature mechanics in the game, Berserker's is the most restrictive in the terms of his gameplay, with only other contender being Bladesworn, with his whip stance taking his kneecaps hostage every time he wants to burst.
Know your fucking place!
It takes a higher than average number of chromosomes to play either of those specs, let alone to run them fully glass, because no amount of damage steroid will fix the mechanical pitfalls that hold both of them down from achieving genuinely good results. Berserker's Rage doesn't really make him stronger for the duration. Wounds at the Rage entry are of course welcome, but they last fractions of time Rage and hits cooldown last combined. Stat steroids are welcome too, but on a spec that lacks everything but damage, they don't really contribute to meaningful change. Not to mention all of those are trait effects, eating at trait space, and frankly, things like ability to end Rage on demand shouldn't be a trait effect in the first place. You could point at Soulbeast having to trade up to swap pets while merged, but he at least gets to unmerge on demand, goddammit. Berserker's offensive prowess requires him to fill his adrenaline bar before he can truly engage, which sure he can do with utility skill, however, adrenaline degrades immediately upon receiving it if player is out of combat, meaning you cannot open onto an enemy with your highest damage combo from outside combat, as even if you manage to rage in the same frame you gain your resource, you'll lose some adrenaline before you're able to burst, stuffing up your combo. You can't do anything interesting with stealth, as you have to hit your enemy, warning them of your presence, before you can even think of laying out your damage. You may think that's not a big issue, just throw a spear or something. Well, in their incredible wisdom, arena nerds decided that attacking someone who blocks or evades doesn't actually put you in combat. Similarly, blocking or evading an attack coming out of stealth doesn't de-stealth the attacker, because this game is stupid. So, your enemy can deny you ability to enter combat. Still not a massive issue, but it's one 8 out of 9 classes don't have to trouble themselves with. Classes like Revenant or Necromancer can run out of resources, that's true, but the resource doesn't deplete out of combat, meaning they don't start every engagement from scratch. Warrior in this regard is just more outdated and less player-friendly. Even further, going in and out of rage doesn't guarantee a benefit either, as core and primal bursts, for some godforsaken reason, share cooldowns, so if you're pushed against the wall, using for example Harrier Toss for those sweet evasion frames, and shortly after pop your Signet of Fury and enter rage, your burst will be on cooldown. That little detail alone essentially punishes strategic use of burst skills, denying Berserker his well-deserved nugget of much-needed depth, and combined with aforementioned lack of baseline option to exit rage on demand, throws so many wrenches into the goulash it nearly makes Berserker a downgrade from core warrior. If I was to change Berserker to fit with current GW2, I'd adjust it as follows. Firstly, of course, ability to end rage on demand should be a baseline feature, not a trait effect. Further going, I'd add to it that once you leave rage, its cooldown is reduced by half of the remaining duration you had at the moment of exiting. Considering you'll still have to invest adrenaline into entering rage, and said cooldown reduction will in realistic scenario buy you 2 maybe 3 seconds, this won't make Berserker overpowered, but will alleviate the discomfort from ending early the mechanic you're incentivized to upkeep. Secondly, I'd add 3 seconds delay between gaining adrenaline and the moment where out of combat decay kicks in, refreshing every time you gain adrenaline. That would simply put Warrior on the same playing field with other specs when it comes to ambush tactics. No longer will I sigh deeply in disappointment every time Allied Thief drops a smoke field or Allied Mesmer pops mass invisibility, because no longer I will have to waste that massive advantage. Tertially? Apologies, I'm illiterate. I'd make core and primal rages have completely separate cooldowns. That alone would open opportunities for players to use to the limit instead of Blood Reckoning and still be able to combo bursts together. Just core into rage into primal, like Blood Reckoning already can. The small amount of flexibility goes long ways, especially in tandem with other adrenaline generating tools Berserker and Warrior in general have access to, while still keeping the power in check as regular cooldowns and adrenaline requirements remain in place. Traits on the other hand, Eternal Champion was surely an interesting experiment, but I'd consider it a failed one. Ability to exit rage manually should be a baseline feature, not a trait effect, while reapplying on-rage effects at its end too led to Eternal Champion builds abusing Savage Instinct and its subsequent nerf, which made it redundant for non-Eternal Champion builds. This trait specifically unfortunately needs to be scrapped and replaced with something else, perhaps something suited for support or healer builds, so that Quickness Staff Berserker in PvE has more flexibility sliding into the role of a healer, and perhaps to enable support Berserker in PvP or Worthy Wars as well. After all, only button on staff remaining unnerfed since Jantir Wild's release is its primal burst Rampart Splitter. Right now might be about bloody time to realize why. A huge sign of gratitude towards the generous Patreon supporters financially contributing to continuous creation of my dubious quality content. And with that said, Crabface out.